Okay, so hi, I'm back with mini lecture 2 for this lecture on Module 5 Sustainable Diets for the week of November 2nd to 6th. And I'll get started here again. Okay, so I'm going to kind of throw you into, so I had another example, this example about the effect of climate change on fruit production, barley production in particular, and the kind of the nuanced results that actually hold compared to sort of cherry picking particular results that may be cessational or foster a point of view. Now I'm going to do the same thing now with sort of a story about the environmental impacts of food more particularly. And this is from 2015, when there were headlines all around the world about this study. And this is one headline that was used: vegetarian diets and healthy diets could be harmful to the environment. Could be more harmful to the environment. More than what is an interesting thing. This is a study done by Tom Fisher and colleagues at Carnegie Mellon in the United States. The headline in the Carnegie Mellon University News was Carnegie Mellon study finds eating lettuce is more than 3 times worse in greenhouse gas emissions than eating bacon. So it was a bit more specific than many of the kind of newspaper headlines around the world. And this is sort of this was the story that was the Carnegie Mellon University story was: contrary to recent headlines, and a talk by actor Arnold Schwarzenegger at the United Nations Paris Climate Change Conference. And I don't know why Arnold Schwarzenegger suddenly becomes an expert, but there you go. Eating a vegetarian diet could contribute to climate change. So then there's a bit of fact here. According to new research by Carnegie Mellon, following the USDA recommendations to consume more fruits, vegetables, dairy, and seafood is more harmful to the environment because these foods have relatively high resource uses and greenhouse gas emissions per calorie. So the first thing is, part of that is certainly true. That's basically a true statement. The question you should think about is, what's the fair basis of comparison between, say, vegetables or, say, lettuce as a particular type of vegetable, and alternatives? Is it per calorie? Do we eat all of these foods because we're interested in the number of calories that we can get by eating them? So this is the kind of the first heads up. Then this kind of sensationalizing of their results was fostered by Fishbeck in this quote: eating lettuce is over 3 times worse in greenhouse gas emissions than eating bacon. But he doesn't put in quotes, or doesn't include in that the proviso that this is measured in per calorie terms, and it would take a huge amount of lettuce to make as many calories as you get from bacon. And this is really an unreasonable comparison. So further to that study is study shown here, which provides more detail about these healthier foods having higher environmental impact. And the conclusion that there's a complex relationship between diet and the environment. What is good for us health-wise isn't always what's best for the environment. That's important for public officials to know, and for them to be cognizant of these trade-offs as they develop or continue to develop dietary guidelines for the future. So the interesting thing is that last statement is something I think most people who have looked at the environmental impact of diets would agree with, but they wouldn't agree with many of these sensational parts of this, like this raw comparison of environmental impact of lettuce versus pork. So this caused a lot of controversy in the scientific literature. This was sort of this original paper by Tom Fishbeck and Hendrickson was then garnered a response a discussion comment by Kim and colleagues here. And they wrote, concerns regarding interpretation and translation of findings in energy use, blue water footprint, and greenhouse gas emissions for current food consumption patterns and dietary recommendations in the US. So they published in the same journal. The three conclusions they drew is that they agree that the environmental benefits of reduced meat consumption may be offset by environmental damage associated with increased consumption of other high environmental impact foods, especially if you substitute meat with dairy. So meat and dairy are both generating large amounts of environmental impact per unit. So if you switch those two, you're not really making much gain, even if dairy is considered a healthier food than meat. However, they stressed that comparison that I've noted already, that comparison on the basis of impact per calorie is an inappropriate comparison. We don't eat lettuce for its calories, but we do eat it for its for meeting other dietary requirements. So to think that you would swap out a whole part of your bacon, and which you're getting calories from, and swap in a whole bunch of lettuce is an unreasonable comparison. They also, Kim et al. Also complained that the authors extrapolated well beyond what the methods could support. They did not compare vegetarian and meat-based diets of swapping out alternatives for meat in a diet. They compared two completely different diets. One, the current diet, and the other one being the USDA recommended diet. In fact, it's unlikely that those actually are options for people, that people would consider changing one diet for another in wholesale. What's more likely is that you might change your protein sources. So a fairer comparison would be if everything else stayed the same and you changed out animal-based proteins for plant-based proteins, what would happen to the environment? What would be the environmental effect? The difference between this actual and potential diets is that a lot of that the healthy diet that they compared, this USDA recommended diet, had low amounts of low impact foods and increased amounts of high impact fish. And so the multiple changes in diets are what mostly led to this conclusion about the high environmental impact of the USDA recommended diet. So Tom and Fishback came back and acknowledged some of these problems with their work, especially how some of their work was misleading to readers in the press release. So there's it's interesting I recommend that you watch this YouTube video. So it's a 4.5-minute YouTube video, which came out the day after the big headlines from Tom and Fishback study. One of the things that they show is that you would have to eat 93 cups of lettuce if you were changing lettuce with strips of bacon to reach the same amount of calories. So clearly an absurd comparison. They showed how important it is to show the units of comparison. So that case, comparing different foods on the basis of calories rather than kind of like to like. So here, comparing lettuce for calories with bacon with calories wasn't a fair unit of comparison. We need to be cognizant of that. And they concluded that the other conclusion to draw from this is the importance of evaluating the methods that are in study, not just the headlines. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. Pause there, stop sharing.